They called it a family wedding, but somehow my name never made the list. No seat, no mention, just silence. But what they didn't expect was what happened next. One salute, one word, and the entire wedding stopped cold. The man who saluted me, he wasn't just a guest. He held the one truth they couldn't bury. Family, wedding, respect, redefined. They called it a family wedding, but my name wasn't anywhere on the list. I showed up anyway. Not for closure, not out of nostalgia, not even out of spite. I came because I wanted to see just how far they'd go pretending I didn't exist. Turns out, they'd go all the way. The second I walked through those gold-plated doors, the air shifted. Eyes flicked toward me, then quickly away. Conversation stumbled. Laughter broke mid-note, like someone had whispered the word death between champagne flutes and roses. My heels struck the marble floor, sharp, echoing, deliberate, and still. No one came to greet me. The hostess fumbled with the seating chart. "Just a moment," she mumbled, scanning the swirls of calligraphy. I leaned in slightly, enough to catch a glance. My name wasn't there. Not under Rebecca. Not under Shaw. Not even in a courtesy spot labeled +1. A pause. A polite half-smile. "You can sit near the back, next to the bar staff." Of course, I gave her nothing in return. No expression, no smile, no raised voice. I've learned, through war zones and living rooms, that silence can cut far deeper than any scream. And in that moment, mine was a blade. I walked past rows of ivory tablecloths and monogrammed gift boxes, past faces I used to call cousins, uncles, friends. They looked at me like I carried a virus. Maybe I did. Maybe truth is a disease in families like mine. I took the last table near the corner. A pile of folded chairs stacked beside me. A server eating his sandwich 2 seats down. The linen on my table? Slightly off-white. Not cream like the others. They'd say it was a mistake, a coincidence. But I know better. In my family, nothing is unintentional. Not the words, not the omissions. Not the way they'd said, "Oh, we didn't know you were still active duty," like I was some relic of a war they no longer wanted to be reminded of. Not the invitation my mother mailed late, unsigned, stuffed inside a blank envelope, like a threat slipped under a stranger's door. They didn't want me there. They just wanted to appear as if they'd done the gracious thing. We sent the invite, didn't we? Without ever making space for me, but I came anyway, because I don't need permission to exist, and I sure as hell don't seek inclusion from people who erase me with surgical precision. The bride, my sister, entered 20 minutes later, all satin smiles and glittering pearls. Not once did she look my way. That wasn't an accident. Her gown shimmered under the chandelier like a trophy, like a disguise worn to forget whose blood got her here. They thought this would go smoothly, that they could slice me out and still smile for the camera. But they forgot one thing. I don't play by their rules, and I never leave quietly. They didn't save me a seat, so I took the one no one dared to fill. From that invisible corner, I watched it all. Every fake toast, every strategic compliment, every glance passed like currency between people who believe reputation equals power. What they didn't know was that I didn't come empty-handed. And before this night was over, everyone in that ballroom would know exactly who I was, and exactly what I'd done. It wasn't anger that drove me into the kitchen that night. It was something colder, calculated. I needed air, distance, something beyond the walls pulsing with orchestras and white lies. The ballroom had become a theater of masks, and I needed a break from pretending I wasn't watching the whole thing burn from the back row. So I wandered through the service hallway, past silver trays and whispered gossip. A waiter nodded at me like I belonged. Maybe it was the way I moved. Maybe it was the dress, plain, black, sharp. Not bridal party approved, not cocktail pretty, but tactical. Clean. Like armor. The kitchen was half abandoned, humming with the afterglow of catered chaos. The smell of thyme and lemon lingered in the air, clinging to the metal counters and tile. It was quieter there, just the soft hum of refrigeration and the distant clink of glass. A sanctuary. Brief, accidental, and exactly what I needed. That's when I saw it. A drawer, slightly ajar, not locked, not hidden, just neglected, like a secret that had gotten tired of hiding. I pulled it open slowly, expecting napkins, wine keys, maybe a pack of mints. Instead, I found the letter. It was folded neatly, tucked beneath a ledger and a stack of post-it notes. Too clean, too intentional for an accident. I felt it before I read it. That feeling in your chest when the air gets thinner and something unspoken tightens around your spine. My name was on the envelope. Not Rebecca, not Ms. Shaw. Just 3 letters, scrawled in a hand I hadn't seen in over a year. Dad. I stared at it for a long time. He'd been gone 8 months. Stroke. Sudden. The kind of quiet exit only a man like him would have chosen. We hadn't talked in the last 3 weeks of his life, not because of a fight, because of silence. His, mine. The kind that stretches, then hardens, then becomes permanent. And still, he'd written me. This letter proved it. I opened it with hands I didn't recognize. Steady, but foreign. Like someone else was moving through me. The words inside weren't dramatic. No revelations, no confessions. Just the kind of letter a father writes when he thinks time might run out. Careful. Intentional. Every line a whisper of regret wrapped in love he didn't know how to say out loud. He'd included something else, too. A photocopy of his handwritten estate changes, dated 3 weeks before his death. My name added back. Not as a footnote, as a co-owner, property, trust, authority. And just like that, the blood drained from my hands. They'd told me he left me nothing, that he was confused at the end, that his decisions weren't sound. Legal manipulation wrapped in family concern, and I, stupidly, believed them. But this wasn't confusion. It was clarity. It was his last move, hidden in a drawer, waiting for someone who still listened with their eyes open. I stood there in the kitchen, the letter trembling slightly between my fingers, not from nerves, but from the slow, sharp realization that I wasn't just forgotten. I'd been stolen from, and now I held the proof. The weight of that paper was heavier than any weapon I'd ever carried. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I smiled. Because finally, I had something they couldn't explain away. Out in the ballroom, someone tapped a glass for a toast. Laughter returned. Applause scattered. But none of them knew what had just shifted. Because while they drank champagne and toasted their own lies, I was holding the one thing that could burn it all to the ground, and I was already planning where the first match would fall. He was standing near the fireplace, drink in hand, surrounded by people who had no idea who he really was. Laughter curled around him like cigar smoke, easy, familiar, fake. And for a moment, I wondered if he still remembered the nights we sat under foreign stars, backs against sandbags, sharing stories we never told anyone else. Mason. He used to call me Red, even when my hair was tucked under a helmet and caked in dust. He was the one I dragged through fire once, literally, after his leg caught shrapnel during a convoy ambush. I carried him a half-mile on my back while bullets cracked open the sky. He bled through my uniform that night, and when the dust cleared, we both swore we'd never let the world turn us into ghosts. But ghosts were all I saw now. His suit was expensive, his watch, newer, his smile, trained. Like everything else at this wedding, polished, rehearsed, sanitized. The man I'd bled with had been replaced by someone who could sit at the family's table, sip their wine, and pretend he hadn't watched them erase me name by name, dollar by dollar. He saw me before I moved, locked eyes, just for a second, long enough for recognition to flicker. Then he turned his body toward the crowd, like I was part of the past he'd already negotiated away. I should have left it there, walked out with the letter and the upper hand. But I didn't, because some debts don't fade quietly. I crossed the floor slow, silent, deliberate. My boots didn't echo this time, they carved. Conversation slowed, not because of me, because of the look in his eyes. That was always the thing with Mason. His eyes gave him away before his mouth ever opened. He looked scared. Funny, I said, voice low. You once told me you'd never forget what I did for you. His jaw flexed. Now's not the time. Why? Because your champagne's still cold? He reached out like he was going to guide me away, perform some delicate damage control. I stepped back. Just enough to draw a line. You bled on me, Mason, I said. You swore. I didn't know about the letter, he snapped. I swear to God I didn't know. I didn't blink. But you knew I was written out. And you said nothing. People were watching now, whispering. But I didn't care. Not about the stairs. Not about the dress code I'd broken. Not even about the woman 2 feet away clinging to his elbow like I was the mistake that ruined their aesthetic. He dropped his voice. It wasn't my decision. No, I said. But silence was. The music shifted behind us. Someone cued the first dance. The room turned toward the bride. Lights dimmed. But Mason didn't move. His hand trembled just enough for the ice in his glass to clink. I leaned in close, just enough for him to feel the weight of every step I'd taken to get here. You were a soldier once, but tonight, you're just a coward in a rented tux. Then I walked away, slowly, without looking back, because I had something stronger than revenge. I had the truth. And I was done keeping it quiet. Across the ballroom, the groom's father was watching me. He wore the uniform of a man who didn't flinch. And when our eyes met, he didn't smile. He saluted. And that's when the room went still. Not because of what I said, but because of what I represented. I didn't need a speech. I didn't need a seat at their table. All I needed was 10 seconds of silence, and a salute that exposed everything they tried to bury. The letter gave me leverage. But the man in that uniform? He gave me a spotlight. And now the only question was, how loud would the truth echo once I stepped into it? The music had just shifted into something soft, classic, clean, the kind you'd hear in a movie right before a kiss. But there was no warmth in the room. Just manufactured elegance, dimmed chandeliers, and a sea of eyes pretending not to stare. I stood still, surrounded by silence sharper than gunfire. And then he moved. The groom's father, retired Colonel James Whitaker, rose from his table like a wave pulling back from shore. No warning, no hesitation. He cut across the dance floor, metals catching light, shoulders squared like the world still needed guarding. He didn't blink. He didn't smile. He stopped 2 feet in front of me. I was still in uniform, my formal blues tailored crisp. My hair pinned back, my expression unreadable. I'd worn it not for memory, but for clarity. I needed them to see, clearly, what they'd tried to forget. And in that stillness, he saluted. Not casually, not like someone being polite at a dinner party. This was regulation sharp, spine straight, fingers slicing the air like honor itself had walked into the room. That soundless gesture struck louder than any microphone, louder than any toast. Because in that moment, a decorated Marine turned toward me, the invisible one, and said everything no one else dared. Ma'am. One word. It shattered the night. You could feel the impact ripple through bone and china. Forks paused midair. Conversations froze like photographs. The bride, my sister, turned so sharply her veil caught on the chair, and Mason's glass finally slipped from his fingers and shattered at his feet. I didn't flinch. I returned the salute. Controlled. Calm. Like I'd done it 1,000 times before. Because I had. Just never in a room full of people who'd tried to erase the reasons I ever wore the uniform in the first place. The colonel lowered his hand slowly, like a curtain falling on the lie they'd all been performing. Then he leaned in, just enough so only I could hear. "They told me you wouldn't come," he said. "But I hoped you would. I read the letter." My stomach coiled. "So you know." He nodded once. "And so will the right people." Then, he stepped back, turned toward the center of the room, cleared his throat, and in a voice that had once commanded battalions, he said, "Before we proceed, I think there's someone here who deserves recognition." No one breathed. Not my mother, her pearls frozen mid-clutch. Not the best man, caught mid-sip with eyes wide as floodlights. No one moved. He motioned toward me. This woman carried a Marine through gunfire. She held her ground while others ran. And tonight, while many here try to forget what duty looks like, she stands as a reminder. My name, full rank and title, rang through that hall like a war drum. It was the toast they never planned to give. And as the crowd turned toward me, unsure whether to clap, hide, or leave, I simply looked at my sister. Her face pale, her mouth tight, her dream wedding unraveling in real time. I didn't need to say a word, because every eye that once refused to meet mine now couldn't look away. And they still didn't know. I hadn't played my last card yet. The inheritance wasn't lost. I'd uncovered the trust. And the forged signature? It was about to be unmasked. I didn't leave when the applause started. I waited. Let them clap. Let them squirm in their designer seats, unsure whether they were honoring me or covering their guilt. Some clapped too hard, overcompensating. Others stayed still, hands folded, lips thin. I watched each face like a battlefield scan. Every twitch, every glance, every swallowed word told me exactly who they were. My sister stood frozen at the altar, her bouquet trembling like it suddenly weighed too much. Her groom shifted beside her, eyes darting toward his father, then toward me, like he was seeing a ghost. But I wasn't dead. I'd just stopped being useful to them. And in this family, that's worse. I stepped forward, not toward the altar, toward the center aisle, heels echoing like a slow countdown. The room parted, not out of respect, but reflex. That's what happens when people realize the one they tried to break is still standing, and still holding something sharp. I reached into my clutch. Every eye followed. I unfolded the letter. 3 pages, hand-signed, notarized, and quietly buried in a drawer they thought I'd never check. But I'd found it. The amended trust. My father's real final wishes. The proof that the signature on the version they'd used in court wasn't just suspicious, it was criminal. I didn't wave it in the air. I didn't raise my voice. I walked it to the front table, right in front of the estate attorney they'd conveniently invited under the guise of a close family friend. I placed it beside his wine glass, watched his hand twitch, watched him read the first line and pale like the blood drained straight into the linen. Then I turned around. "Keep your champagne," I said, calm, even. "You'll need it." No one stopped me. No one dared. I walked out the same way I walked into combat. Steady, prepared, and already knowing how the story ends. The ballroom doors opened for me like they'd been waiting all night. And behind me, silence. No music, no toasts, no laughter. just the echo of truth finally dragging its heels across their polished floors. Outside, the air hit sharp and cold. My breath fogged. My heels clicked down the stone steps. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because sometimes revenge doesn't need fireworks. Sometimes it's a quiet exit, while the fire burns behind you. And I knew what they'd do. The phone calls, the scrambling, the desperate attempts to spin the narrative, but the paper trail was clean. The date was stamped, and the court would see what they tried to erase. Let them have their photos. I have the signature. Let them have their wedding. I have the will. And let them remember that night forever. Not for the dress, not for the cake, not for the vows, but for the moment everything they built on lies came crashing down in silence, because the one they left off the list walked out with everything they tried to steal. They thought I came to crash a wedding, but I came to reclaim my name. And when I walked out of that ballroom, calm, unbothered, and undeniably in control, I didn't just leave behind the lies. I left behind every version of myself that ever begged to be seen. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't demand justice. I let the facts speak. I let the silence sting. And most importantly, I let them sit in the discomfort of watching someone they tried to erase walk out with more power than they could ever buy. The room never recovered from that salute, or from the file I handed the attorney in the hallway. It was never about revenge. It was about restoration. Letting them taste the consequences of rewriting history while I rewrote my future. Because in the end, dignity isn't about how loud you speak. It's about how deeply you're rooted when everything around you tries to shake your foundation. I didn't need applause. I didn't need a headline. I just needed one moment of truth, and I gave it to myself. Here's the truth this story leaves behind. Sometimes the people who should protect you are the first to try and silence you. And when that happens, you have two choices: break or build. Break into their version of you, or build into something they can't touch. You don't need a crowd. You don't need permission. You just need clarity, courage, and the audacity to walk through the fire without asking anyone to follow. So let me ask you this. Have you ever been cut out of something you rightfully belong to? If yes, how did you handle it? Drop your story in the comments. I'd love to hear what strength looks like in your world. And if this story struck a chord, consider subscribing. Because around here, we don't just share stories. We reclaim power. One voice, one truth, one bold exit at a time. One click might be small, but your support tells us these stories matter, and that keeps us going. Thanks for hearing what most chose to ignore. The truth needed someone to witness it, and that someone was you.